Bill France raced here a lot.
Friends, we're here in Spartanburg, South Carolina, and I've called Spartanburg home for the last, year and a half now or so. And if you know anything about racing history, you'll know that Spartanburg was once a hotbed for racing. But I didn't know this until very recently when somebody told me that there is an abandoned NASCAR track that has quite the history, but it's located right here in Spartanburg. In fact, it's pretty much in my backyard. So today, we're gonna go and tour this awesome place. And we made it right here to this patch of dirt here at the Piedmont Interstate Fairgrounds. This place apparently used to be a NASCAR track, and like it's literally right here in my backyard pretty much. So I would explore this track by myself, but fortunately I found the exact person I need to tour this track with. And this is Perry Allen Wood. Perry is a local historian who's actually written a book called The Silent Speedways of the Carolinas, which talks about all sorts of abandoned racetracks throughout North and South Carolina. And Perry, it's a pleasure to have you here
Thank
today.
you very much. It's great to be here.
So Perry and I, we're gonna take a tour of this place. He's gonna point out some things. We're gonna talk about the history. So I'm excited to have you come along.
I grew up here in Spartanburg, and my father was a city policeman. And of course, he knew Smoky Wood. He knew everybody in town, and but he was particularly fond of auto racing. And at that time, when I was born in 1952, I mean, this was like the center, or one of the centers, I would say. It didn't outshine Daytona, but there were a lot of race cars and drivers and teams that came out of Spartanburg, and of course, this was the home track for a lot of them. There were races here frequently, not just what is now evolved into Cup. This track ran frequently with modifieds and sportsman cars and Grand Nationals. And I came to see them all. My dad would bring me, and my mother and brother, we'd come to all of them, and or most of them anyway. But, I was particularly fond of the Grand Nationals, because they were the ones that, the races were on the radio, on the weekends, and they got the most press with drivers. And Spartanburg had so many. Like Buck Baker lived here then, and Rex White, and Cotton Owens was just great. And Bud Moore was one of the top car builders in the country. Jack Smith raced out of Spartanburg. I know I'm going to leave some out. Dick Brooks, Elmo Henderson. Just a lot of drivers and teams, and so they all came here.
I mean, just thinking about all these guys that Perry just mentioned, I mean, talking about Richard Petty, Junior Johnson, Tim Flock. On the note of Tim Flock, there was a very infamous story of an injury he sustained here, but it wasn't related to a crash.
Some crazy things happened here. Tim Flock was in a race in New York State, and the next day they have a race here in Spartanburg, and they drove overnight. Lee Petty drove overnight in his race car from upstate New York to here to race the next day. And Tim Flock got here. I think Tim Flock might have flown, but he was resting here in this infield, and a salesman for Champion Spark Plugs, I think, ran over his head. And he was out of action for like 2 or 3 months before he came back. Just crazy stuff like that. Well, this is where the start and finish line was. And you can look up that way and see the center aisle of the grandstand with the, I guess that's like a photographer's or some kind of special fenced off area at the top of the grandstand, but it's because this was a start-finish line. There was a pagoda right here that you can see in old photographs. It looks like a pagoda, and for some reason they called them that. I guess because the one in Indianapolis was always and it's still called a pagoda, but with the architecture of it. But it stood right here in the scoring stand, and the pit area was right about around the area of that light pole. That covered area was not here. This was just all infield parking for spectators, and probably down to about where you can see a wall down there is as far as the spectators went out. For some reason, they just didn't let them go any further than that. But this is right in the middle of the main straightaway, and if I may mention it was 65 years ago today that Wendell Scott, the great black race driver that won a race and has been memorialized more or less in movies and books and everything.
NASCAR Hall of Famer, right?
NASCAR Hall of Famer. He ran his first Grand National race right here 65 years ago today on March 4th, 1961.
That is so awesome that we're actually filming on that anniversary.
You couldn't have picked a better day.
At the track where he made his debut at.
And I was here, I was 9 years old, and he had bought a car from Buck Baker, who lived here in Spartanburg. And I thought it was Buck Baker. I mean, it said Buck Baker on the door. It was number 87, a 1960 Chevrolet. So anyway, it wasn't. It was Wendell Scott. And in fact, I have a radio show on Sunday mornings called Start Your Engines. And this past week, we had Frank Scott, Wendell's son, on the show. And he talked all about that day and Wendell's career and everything. So yeah, you picked the perfect day, the weather, nice and warm.
And that is really awesome because, you know, we had to actually reschedule this.
Yes.
And just by coincidence, we scheduled it on the 65th anniversary of that historic day.
Yep. Action was just incredible. The top drivers in the country were here that drove stock cars. And I saw most of those races. My oldest memory is being right over here at the start-finish line in my mother's arms. And it was like July 4th or 5th. I think the race maybe had been rained out on the 4th, but it was 1956, 55 or 56. I was 3 or 4 years old, but I remember the Kike for Chryslers had won the race with Tim Flock in one of them and his brother Fonte in the other, and they had finished first and second. And I'm standing there in my mother's arms. She's standing right over there right at the finish line, and everybody's all gathered around. And I think my father, being a city policeman, enabled us to get some places where normal people couldn't go. And I know we got toy motorboats, my brother and I, that night, and my parents got decks of cards because they were sponsored by Kike for Outboard Motors. But I mean, that's just like my oldest memory. They had so many fantastic races here. You need a 2-hour documentary just for me to sit here and tell you everything.
In fact, on the note of race, this track actually had some very interesting history because they would hold colored-only races with just black drivers back in the day. And apparently thousands of people would come and watch, you know. Just a very interesting piece regarding that civil rights history, but they would have literally races there would just be black drivers racing here. Super cool to think about that history.
If you want to take a walk around, you can actually look and see that the track looks slanted. I mean, I don't know if part of that is for the speed the cars were going. I imagine it partially was, and maybe for drainage.
Yeah.
But this grandstand here is the only one I remember. You will see a lot of other photographs and video that shows this enormous wooden grandstand that used to be here with a roof on it.
How many people would that seat?
Man, I never saw it, but some of the articles from back then talk about 10,000 people being at the races.
Really?
Yeah, but it wasn't a 10,000 seat grandstand, but it was 3 or 4 times bigger than that. Getting into the first turn here, now there was a white, at the end of the grandstand, it was just a white fence that you can probably still see some remnants of when we get over to the backstretch.
Yeah.
And behind the white fence right here was the gate where the cars would come into the infield. To the pit area.
So all these jersey barriers, you see jersey barriers up on the outside wall. We also have them on the inside wall. Those were not original to the original track, correct?
No, that was from when they did the renovation, or they just made it raceable. I wouldn't even call it a renovation. They just made it raceable when they were trying to build a museum here in Spartanburg.
So this track was very, very prominent in NASCAR in the 50s and 60s. Much of NASCAR was based here in upstate of South Carolina, and they really held quite a number of cup races here. Like, we're talking like almost 25, and that's just amazing to see it like it is. 25 cup races, now just a pile of dirt pretty much. The other thing that is interesting is this track, you know, it relatively lost its prominence in the mid 60s, but it would hold races here and there, and ultimately in the early 2000s, there were some people in this area that were trying to petition NASCAR to build a museum here. And so they opened this place back up for a few races, few exhibition races where they'd have a lot of legendary names to try to fundraise and garner some national prominence to build a museum here in Spartanburg. And I was actually lucky enough to find someone who won one of the last races here, one of those exhibition races.
Well, the first race was a fundraiser for the museum for Spartanburg, NASCAR museum. And so it was a fundraiser, and so we had a lot of the NASCAR guys that ran, and probably some fill-ins too here or there, but that's how that came about.
They tried to get the track and build a museum here in Spartanburg and renew the track, freshen it up to have some races. And Chuck Piazza, he won the first one that they had here, and I think that might have been 2001. And of course, he had to go through David Pearson right about where we're sitting to win it. But it was great to see the legends out here racing, and the museum never happened, and the racetrack has gone back to a state where I don't think you'll ever see any more races here again, but you can see the outline of what used to be. It was a harness track, and they were still, in fact, some of the articles that I found here recently talk about the stock cars running in one day, and then the next day was reserved for harness racing. And they used to have stables over here in turn 2, and white fence all the way around it, and you can see right where we are here, which we're sitting in the first turn doing this. But the exhibition barns and everything for the fair.
So I gotta tell you, Perry, it is a pretty cool feeling walking in the same spot where so much history happened. I mean, so many amazing drivers raced here, right?
Well, right here is the exact spot where Billy Wade took out Ned Jarrett in 1964. I mean, in one of the most amazing races. If you look at that starting lineup, it was like a who's who of stock car racing. And the main belligerents that day were Billy Wade, who drove for Bud Moore, and Ned Jarrett. And they were, Ned Jarrett drove for Bondi Long. Richard Petty was here driving for his family. David Pearson was here driving for Cotton Owens. Buck Baker was here driving for Ray Fox. Kel Yarborough was here. It was just swapping the lead back and forth between Petty and Pearson and Billy Wade. And it came down to, and Ned Jarrett, and it came down to Wade and Jarrett. And Wade knocked Jarrett out of the way to take the lead. And then Jarrett knocked him out of the lead down here in the fourth turn to get the lead back. And the famous saying I always heard was that Bud Moore told Billy Wade just to bring back the steering wheel. And they came down this straightaway that we're sitting at side by side, and Wade hit Jarrett. He tried to knock him out into Bishop Street, and Wade flipped a couple of times, and Ned Jarrett flipped a couple of times, and they huffed and puffed and walked back to the back to the pit area, and Richard Petty won the race. It's the greatest race I've ever seen. That race was so popular and was so fantastic that they had what would be absolutely unheard of today. In August of 1964, they came back a couple of weeks before the Southern 500 and had a match race. Joe Littlejohn arranged a match race between the top 4 guys in the point standings, who happened to be Richard Petty, David Pearson, Billy Wade, and Ned Jarrett. Of course, Wade and Jarrett had practically had a war right on this spot. And they had that match race here at the fairgrounds as a part of a doubleheader that also featured a 100-mile sportsman race, modified sportsman race that had huge names in it too. But could you imagine trying to get the top 4 in the point standings to do a match race these days?
That is incredible.
Well, they did it right here. And that's one of the few times I ever sat in a grandstand, for free, of course. And when they were warming up, Billy Wade blew his engine in Bud Moore's Mercury. So Bud Moore told Joe Littlejohn to go ahead and run the sportsman races and things, qualifying, some other preliminaries. He loaded the Mercury up, went back to his shop across over here on North Fairview Avenue with his mechanics on the back of the truck taking the engine out, getting it loosened up while they're going down the street. And they got to the shop. They had an engine that was already on the hoist that could come out of Darrell Derringer's car that they had been testing in Daytona. They took out, when they got there, all they had to do was lift out Wade's engine and drop Derringer's engine in it, and he was back here in 42 minutes, I think.
My gosh.
And everybody thought they'd changed cars. But they didn't change cars, they changed the engines. And I mean, it's documented. So they ran the match race, and Billy Wade was a runaway winner. It wasn't even close. And I think Petty hit the guardrail in the fourth. It was only a 20-lap race.
Right.
Hit the guardrail down here in the third turn, and Wade outran Jarrett and Pearson, and it wasn't even close.
My gosh.
And it was just an amazing thing that
I mean,
I wouldn't call it crazy. It's just amazing. It was
Right.
amazing the race was even held,
right.
let alone the way that Bud Moore and Billy Wade won it.
Yeah, you could never get away with something like that today. My gosh.
No, they wouldn't even consider doing something like that.
Right.
And of course, the other big wreck I remember here was Chuck and David Pearson. And Chuck took the checkered flag that day.
David had a real good handling car, but he would kind of run out of steam about the flagman. So when we started the race, I got up behind David, and I had a little more engine than he had, and I tried to get around when David was real good at blocking anyhow, so followed him a few laps, and he would wave at me at the flag stand, like, I wasn't sure what he was waving at first. Later on, I learned he was telling me that's all I got. So I followed a lap or two or whatever it was, couldn't get by him, and then come down by I think he got used to me staying behind him, and we got to the flagman. I passed him and went into the first turn, and I felt the bump, and I knew it had to be him. He was the only one close, but when we went in, I got under him here, and he ran up over my right rear, which shot him right in the concrete. I felt, I hated that happen. And I couldn't get the car fixed in time for him to be, really competitive. So we did win that race, and then the next year we had a rematch, and David won it, and I run second. We always had a good relationship until the fairgrounds. Then every time we'd go out, and we'd go to the same restaurant sometime, and I'd see him, and he'd maybe have his girlfriend there, and I'd stop by and say, "Hey, David," and he said, "That's the guy that wrecked me." So I kind of had a stigma there that was uncomfortable, from time to time. He didn't like to lose at anything, checkers or anything else. He was real competitive, and then real smart. He ran all those years for the Woods brothers, won a lot of races with them, and drove some for Holman. And
I would usually sit here on Pearson Record Company, which was the Ford dealership. Always had their record parked right here. Red Collins was the driver. Never forget Red. And I'd be sitting on his record. I'd have to hop off when they'd have a wreck because he had to go pick up the cars.
Right.
But you could see when cars were coming into the track, you go over in the pits the first thing when you get here and see who all was already here.
Right.
But you could see them, especially if they were on a truck, you could see just the roof of the car above the white fence. And it was so exciting to say, here comes Wendell Scott, or here comes Bob Cooper, any of these other names of people that you could see were getting ready to come through the gate right here. Because you could see their car going down Bishop Street.
That is incredible.
Now the other gate, they've got one right here, but it was closer to here where we are now pretty much. And on the other side of that gate were the horse stables from the harness racing days. And they were here forever, and you'll see that in a lot of photographs. But you can see people sitting on top of the stables.
My gosh.
And on top of the fence. And all in those trees, which were about half that tall.
Man.
They weren't nearly that tall. In fact, David Pearson says, I've read that he said, that one of the reasons he got interested in auto racing was sitting in the trees watching the races at the fairgrounds.
Really?
Because he
My
was from
gosh.
Whitney, which is near here.
So I cannot imagine being a young David Pearson climbing these trees. I mean, you would have no idea that how many wannabe race drivers would probably end up here on a weekend just up in these trees up here, looking at wanting to, you know, maybe race someday. That is incredible.
Zach, if you look real hard, you should be able to see the metal guardrail in there someplace.
See if we can
It's
find
pretty
it.
well grown over, much more than the last time I was here. You could easily see it, and we're actually here at the best time of the year when the vegetation is asleep for the winter. Right there, you can see it real good.
Let's see.
I'm gonna let you walk on in there.
I'm gonna be dangerous and try to walk in and
well, you
find
can
this
see it. I
thing.
can see it from here.
Oh yeah, look right there. Look at that.
Yep,
Holy cow.
and it's pretty beat up. I think quite a few cars bounced off of it.
Oh my gosh. Dang. That is so cool. So this was basically the wall the entire time?
Well, I mean, I imagine at one time it probably was wooden instead of that metal guardrail.
Right. Dang. I mean, it's basically just a,
So one strip,
something you'd see on a highway,
yeah,
you know?
one strip. I mean,
Yeah.
they weren't. I think Dick Hutcherson's got the track record around here. Isn't it about 69 miles an hour or something? Dick Hutcherson holds the track record, if I'm not mistaken.
Wow. So I think this may have been in your book, or I may have read this somewhere else, but this first turns 1 and 2 was pretty notorious for people trying to knock the wall down, right?
Yeah, and you're coming by the grandstand and they're all pumped up and they're trying to, their qualifying lap would end right over there in the center of the grandstand where the finish line was. And it was, I think I sent you some other photographs of cars just piled up here. It was like a junkyard.
Man. that
And
is
they
incredible.
go through this fence. See that fence over there,
Yeah.
a wooden fence. I can't really get a good look at it. The glare is so great. But there was a wooden fence all the way down through there, and they would go through that fence and come back through the gate with hedges and rose bushes and everything
Oh my
on
gosh.
the front of the car. They started racing motorcycles here around 1911 because the fair always came at the end of the year, the county fair. And this is the Piedmont Interstate Fairgrounds, and that's where we're at right now. But from like the mid-20s until before World War II, there was a lot of AAA auto racing here, which was the sanctioning body for the Indianapolis cars. And a lot of Indianapolis cars and drivers came here, most notably Ted Horn, who in 9 races at Indianapolis, he never won it, but he was never worse than 4th. He was just an amazing driver, and he raced here, and he had the track record here. Henry Garand had the track record here. He was an Indy driver, and there was just great excitement here. Some of the articles are just amazing about how the drivers would come here from up north and go to the dealerships to work on their cars and things like that. And just tremendous amount of activity took place right here at this track.
So approximately where was the spot that you hung out? Where was your
Right
wrecker
here, right between the first and second turn,
So-
sitting on the Pearson Motor Company wrecker.
at? Dang,
My daddy's police car sitting right next to it,
man.
or our family station wagon.
Right.
My daddy, Smokey Wood, would load up the whole neighborhood, all the kids, and we'd come right through the gate right here, and he'd just wave at the ticket guy.
Man.
I mean, my father didn't believe in buying tickets.
How lucky were y'all?
I couldn't
Oh
have
my
been
God.
any luckier.
That is incredible.
With all the race shops in Spartanburg at that time, he and I would go around several times a year to look at the race cars. I'd say, Daddy, let's go see the race cars. And we go to Bud Moore's garage, and I'd climb up and I'd sit in Buck Baker's race car or Joe Weatherly or whoever it was and go, pretending I'm him. And Daddy and Bud Moore would be, they'd go back in the office and, I don't know, have a nip, who knows. And then we'd leave there and go to Cotton Owens and do the same thing. Then we'd leave there and go to Buck Baker's and do the same thing. Then we'd leave there and go to Jack Smith's shop over by the Beacon Drive-In and do the same thing. I mean, it was a great childhood.
That is incredible.
But this was the focal point.
So you said the pagoda would have been somewhere right in there. Obviously, the picnic tables weren't here when track was running, but it would have been somewhere in there.
Yeah, well, right up next to the track. I mean, pretty much right beside where we were standing earlier.
Right.
Now, I don't remember this car ever running at the fairgrounds, but it's getting ready to. I guess they're going to have some sort of
cool old Corvette body on it too, man.
There's another one over there. The lights were in the infield and pointed out to the track.
Oh, wow.
So they weren't on the outside pointing in, they were inside pointing out.
Right.
And you can just imagine all the red dust. It was just red dust. Like at night, everything was black except for this ribbon of red dust.
Man.
For a half a mile surrounding you.
It seems relatively narrow though, too, the track with...
Well, it was. I mean, I imagine it was pretty narrow. And
yeah.
Chuck will tell you the 70 or 80 miles an hour, it was even narrower.
Dang.
Right here, I don't know if you remember this or not, Chuck, but right here, back in the Grand National days, there was a string of lights that ran across the track, yellow light bulbs that were the caution lights. And when the caution would come on, you know, they'd flip those lights on, and it was like a string of lights across the backstretch at the third turn. And I remember sitting on the tow truck, the wrecker up there, I could always see when the caution lights came on.
Dang.
And I knew there was a wreck somewhere if it hadn't happened right in front of me.
Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about first your book.
Well, it was the genesis. This racetrack was the genesis of it. Because I came out here and I took a bunch of pictures, and then I found I was moving from Miami to Charlotte, and I went up a couple of months early to find a place to live and make some arrangements, but I had a lot of time on my hands. So I said, you know, I've got the fairgrounds, Spartanburg, pretty well documented. Why don't I go to find all the other tracks in North and South Carolina that held at least one Grand National race, but are not in use anymore. I mean, not at all. And which left out a lot of tracks like Greenville-Pickens, which was operational until a couple of years ago.
Right.
So that didn't qualify. Spartanburg qualified beautifully, and is the first chapter of the book.
So I've actually read a decent bit of Perry's book, and I tell you, it is, if you're a diehard race fan, it is a must read, because Perry has really done his research about all these tracks. And in fact, I'm going to utilize a lot of his content in there to help me as I continue documenting tracks. It is a really good book, and it's available for purchase. So I'll link some information about that in the description below. But Perry also has a radio show.
But no, our radio show is global, and we have great guests. We've normally had our first guest of the year was Mike Helton, who is CEO of NASCAR. He wasn't able to do it this year, but hopefully we can get him back. This is our 9th year. Speaking of this being the anniversary of Wendell Scott's first start, we had Wendell's son, Frank, on the show this past Sunday. And he was just, when I lined him up for the show, and I've had him on several times, he said, now I got to do this and that, and I can't take too much time. By the time we were done, he was saying, well, I've got more. I'm not finished. And I'm like, well, sorry, Frank, we got commercials. I got to pay for this. So he was fantastic. And the lady I talked about, Tony Arnold McFarland, her dad was on Wendell's pit crew, and he was there that first race 65 years ago today.
He probably was standing pretty much where we were standing.
Well, I didn't even know about her. And I read her father passed away, and I'm so sorry I never got to meet him. His name was Ray Arnold. And in fact, NBC that year did about a 5-minute little blurb on him on their race coverage on Sunday. It was great. But I saw this thing in the Spartanburg paper that she was holding a memorial service for her father, Ray Arnold. Ray Arnold was also a high school teacher, I think at Eastside High in Greenville, and he lived in Spartanburg, but he taught auto mechanics, and they had a drag racer. The school had a drag racer, and they used to run it at Greer Drag Strip and I think Spartanburg Dragway. I mean, that's the kind of high school I could go to, you know, and get into that. But he had passed away, and she was having a memorial service out here at the fairgrounds, and so I'm cutting the grass. This was on a Friday afternoon, and I'm got my headphones on, and it's mentioned on the radio. And I said, wait a minute. I mean, let me just go see what's going on out there. So I didn't even take a shower. I just threw on a hat and washed off a little bit and came out here. And this place was pretty much full. And this pavilion we're under, she had this set up with a few displays and maybe some refreshments. And a big movie screen, inflatable movie screen. I'd never seen one before where she was going to show racing movies. And I went up and introduced myself to her. And I told her Perry Wood and all that stuff. And she said, I said, I was here that night. And she said, you were here? And I went, yeah, I saw him. I thought it was Buck Baker, but I was here. I know all about it. And so she said, would you like to talk to the crowd? And I said, well, you know, why not? So I made like a 15, 20-minute speech about, you know, how I was here that night. And since then, Tony and I have been really good friends. She doesn't live in Spartanburg anymore. She lives up in Winston-Salem, I think. But she comes on the show at least once a year during Black History Month, which February was. I think it's February 1st to March 1st. We had Frank on our last show last Sunday, was March 1st. This is March 4th. And we like to celebrate the Black history of NASCAR, and we've had some other local Black drivers. We haven't landed anybody like Bubba Wallace yet, but I'd love to get Willie T. Ribbs, who ran a couple of Cup races. He ran truck races. He was in the Indianapolis 500 one year. He should be available, and I would love to have him on any time. It doesn't have to be during Black History Month, but we celebrate all. We're all inclusive. If you raced, we'll put you on and talk about it. And Chuck's been on the show many times. And so, I mean, that's about it for the radio show. This is our 9th year, and I'm 74. Hopefully I can keep doing it a few more years.
Yeah.
And continue to have good guests. The bad thing about it is, a lot of our guests that I like to have, Bud Moore, David Pearson, Cotton Owens, they're not with us anymore.
Right.
And so Greg Moore was my co-host. He got me on the show, and he's Bud Moore's son, and he's passed away. And he's 9 years younger than me. So, well, no, 7 years younger. But anyway, the point being, I've had to get some younger people on the show. Now, we have Deb Williams on every week at 10:20. She just got inducted into the NASCAR Hall of Fame by winning the Hall Squire Award for journalism. She's also in the National Motorsports Association, Press Association Hall of Fame. I mean, she is not just some reporter. She is the reporter as far as I'm concerned. She's on our show every week. Deb's a good friend of mine. And we also have Mike Hill, who was Junior Johnson's crew chief with the Budweiser cars for Waltrip and Terry Labonte and Jeff Bodine all those years. He comes on every week after our Legends guest. Our Legends guest we do at 9 o'clock. And then whenever he's done or she's done, from 9:40, we let Mike talk about, he's got a great perspective on racing and knows everybody. So we've sort of injected now he's younger than me, but he knows a lot of people that are still racing. And so we've, I think, got enough juice to keep doing the show a few more years.
So I've left Chuck and Perry behind just for a second because it's getting pretty dicey back in here as we make our way down towards turn 3. So we're gonna go down here and see what we can find about this old track in my backyard. This is super cool. So this is the backstretch. We're looking down towards where turn 2 would have let off. And it ran down here. And then that's where the entrance of turn 3 would have been, right down there. You can see that it's grown up pretty good. And it wasn't that long ago, but this place was a dirt track. They They raced here for the last time in the early 2000s, and now it's pretty grown up with a lot of briars and thorns and ow, like one just got me there. But yeah, super cool to see this place. I don't know if you can see in there, but somebody's dumped some old tires. They're not racing tires, but looks like some people have dumped some things. More tires over there. You can see there, that's some more of the Jersey barriers there. And behind it, I don't know if you can see in there, there's that original guardrail right there. And wow, so cool. And then I don't know if you can see down there, but it seems like there's a pretty good drop down there off the back end of turn 3 into turn 4 over there. Wow, that is cool.
Bill France, and going back to the early days, Bill France raced here a lot. In fact, I've supplied you with some newspaper articles that in the headline it says France finishes second, you know, but Bill France, who founded NASCAR, raced on this track. Joe Littlejohn promoted this track, who was from Spartanburg, and he was the first man to average 100 miles an hour in a stock car on Daytona Beach in 1950. But he got out of that into promoting, and he didn't just promote here at Spartanburg. He promoted some races in Asheville. I know he promoted at least one at the Atlanta International Raceway, which is now, I think, Echo Park Speedway or something. But he was a good driver. He was a great promoter. I know for some reason he had Herb Thomas, who was a 2-time champion back in the early 50s of NASCAR Grand National. He had an extra, he got Herb Thomas to put a passenger side seat in his car and went with him when he qualified at Asheville, just rode along. All I can say about Joe Littlejohn, I did not know him personally. My father was very close friends with him. As I said, he was a cop and he knew everybody in town, especially if you were involved in racing. And Joe Littlejohn promoted every stock car race that I think I went to here. And I don't know that I was here for the 53 race, but I know I was here from 55 through 66. When they founded NASCAR at the Streamline Hotel in Daytona Beach in 1947, he's very prominent in those photographs of the crowd that was on hand the day they invented NASCAR. He tried very hard and lobbied very hard with Bill France, and there were a lot of meetings to build a big super speedway here in Spartanburg. And they came real close to getting it done. One site they had, the main site was out at the downtown airport, also the oldest airport in the state, the first airport in the state. But they were going to put the track there, and then I think they had a couple of other locations. There's a lot of reasons why that didn't happen. I know Bill France came here several times to make it happen, help it take place, and Joe Littlejohn, of course, was right in the middle of all of that, and the track ended up in Talladega. So there's a lot of people still angry about that. I'm over it, but you know, Joe Littlejohn belongs in the NASCAR Hall of Fame for, I guess if they've got a category, they have some other categories, but for promotions, as a promoter, and actually, he was a great driver, pre-war, right up until and post-war until I would say probably 1950 or so. Joe Littlejohn there's many stars involved with auto racing from Spartanburg, and Joe Littlejohn is about the brightest one. But Bill France, what I was going to say is he kicked Tim Flock, who was a 2-time champion, and the great Curtis Turner out of NASCAR because it was mainly Curtis Turner tried to unionize NASCAR in 1961. And so Bill France kicked him out permanently. Permanently lasted until 1965 when they came back here to run the fairgrounds, one of the races, and attendance was lousy everywhere in NASCAR, and they were trying to, one of the problems was in 65, the Hemis had been banned. And Bill France had banned effectively Chrysler cars. And so he reinstated Curtis Turner and Tim Flock, but I don't think Tim ever ran again. He was getting on up there. But he reinstated Curtis Turner, and he was going to make his big comeback here. And he, Petty, I think Richard Petty had been injured at Asheville earlier. And so Curtis Turner was going to drive Petty's car here. And I remember it was a 64 Plymouth. When he came out to qualify, I mean, this place was absolutely packed. And I was sitting right over there between the first and second turns. And I mean, when he came around the turn, and he was so famous as a dirt track driver, all you could see was the front of that car. That's how I know it was a 64 Plymouth. I was staring at the front of the car. He was so sideways, but in perfect control, just incredible. And I think on his first it was qualifying, and he'd already been warming up and just tearing the place apart. Now, he hadn't been on a NASCAR track since 1961. So I think his first qualifying lap was, if it wasn't good enough for the pole, it was close to it. But his second qualifying lap, he spun out and hit the wall right exactly where we are. Now, it was a different wall and guardrail and a wooden fence and all that stuff. The gate was right here that they used to let the cars in and out of the infield, and there was another one over there. But he hit that fence and bent the car up, and I said, okay, well, you know, they'll get it fixed up, and he qualified. He got one lap in anyway. But I think my heart sank and a lot of hearts that day when they loaded it up on the trailer, and he did not get to make his return here in Spartanburg. He tried, and he put on a show that was worth the price of admission. Of course, I never paid to get in this place, but he ended up making his return in the Southern 500. Now, this was in August, so he made his return in the Southern 500 on Labor Day, maybe 3 weeks later, 2 or 3 weeks later, and didn't really do much. And he did win a race at Rockingham that year, but his return was here at Spartanburg.
You know, it's just so incredible to me to be standing right in the same spot that Hall of Famers, NASCAR legends raced at. I mean, this place, like I said, it had nearly 25 Cup races here. A NASCAR track, like a full-blown one. And it's just so weird almost just to see it so silent, just looking like this. And that's, again, I say it every time, this is the reason why we got to support the tracks that we still have, because more and more are ending up like this. And it's just a shame because the stories that this place can tell, man, it's incredible. But we've just got to make sure that those don't die out, because I mean, I've been told some amazing things about this place already, and it's just sad to see it like it is now. You know, in some of the earlier shots, I don't know if you could realize how big this place was. We're in turn 3 and 4, and that's back way down there where we were standing to start the video. This place is a half mile, you know, and so it's just deceivingly big. And yeah, it's just wild to see it in the current state it's in. And this is the exit of where turn 4 would have been. You can see still remnants of the wall up there. And then now we're back out in the open. We're gonna meet up with Perry and Chuck in just a second. But let's go check out this wall here. This is super cool. Yep, you can see kind of in there. I don't know how well you can see it, but yeah, that's some of that original wall there. My gosh, look at that. Now I'm gonna guess that this wall is probably from the exhibition races they held several, I want to say about 3 or 4 after the track tried to get back and rolling. But see there, that's the original wall. And I don't know if you can see up there, we're now on the front straightaway. That is again more of the wall here, all covered up. See that right here? Look at that. You can even see, I don't know if you can see it right here. There's an old reflector right there from the Jersey barrier. And that's the front straightaway. And there's the grandstands. Start finish line would have been super cool. Obviously auto racing is really dangerous. Were there any fatalities that happened here?
The only one I'm aware of, now there've been some people badly injured here. You know, Tommy Irwin, he wrecked, and that was in March of 1963, right here in the first turn. He had just finished real well at Daytona, and had a brand new 63 Ford that he rolled several times right here. And he never really raced much after that. Tommy was a great driver and a really good driver, and should have been Rookie of the Year instead of Richard Petty in 1959. But to answer your question, there was a driver named Wheeler Braden, and he was a AAA sprint car driver. And it was on October 19th, 1935, and they were having the races here during the fair. And he was, I think it was a 20-lap race. And he was battling with a guy from Atlanta named Red Redmond. And they had a crash right here in the first turn. And Wheeler Braden's dad was a prominent physician in Washington, D.C. And Wheeler, was rushed to Spartanburg General Hospital, as it was called at the time, and passed away. And it's just sad to read the write-up in the newspaper about how his father came down from Washington and took him back on the train. And my father used to tell me something about a motorcycle rider got killed here one time, but I never found any. That's all I know. I don't even know if it's true. And my father wouldn't lie to me, but I've never found any documentation. But Wheeler Braden is very well documented. He was 28 years old and took his last lap right here.
I mean, that is really sad to think about. But you also mentioned motorcycle racing too. We talked about earlier that this track we're well over 100 years old, but that's really what it started out as, right?
Well, I look back as far as I can go, and the farthest I ever found any mention of motorized racing was just a little block that said motorcycle races. It was an ad for the fair, but it said motorcycle races. And it was a 1911, November something, 1911. So, they had motorcycle races. There's no details. I looked at the paper the next day if it was possible, because they don't have every single day, to see if there were any results, and there weren't. But when you get on up into the 20s, and Spartanburg was good about having a race on the 4th of July or thereabouts, and another guy, Johnny Hannon, he held a track record here, and he went to Indianapolis in 1934 or 5 and had a really hot car. It was back in the riding mechanic days, and went out on the track and got killed on his first lap. He didn't even make a lap, and he and his riding mechanic killed. This is the nature of the way it was back in those days. They fixed the car and qualified it for the 500. They fixed it in like 9 days. And on the 8th lap of the 500, it killed 2 more people, the same car. And this is just, it's just a different time, an age when, that to me is unthinkable.
So,
it's
4 deaths in the same car in
a week.
8 days.
It's like, 8 or 9 days. They call it 2 weeks. Let's be generous. And that's the way it was. People, that's another subject of a book I haven't written yet, but I may never get around to it. But there's cars that kill 3 people, over 10, 12 years. I hate to be gross or disrespectful, but they literally washed the thing out and put somebody else in it and make a few minor repairs. The cars were much sturdier than the drivers. They called them hoodoo wagons because they'd kill somebody. But, race driver needs a ride, and it's a good car. And the car that killed Jimmy Bryan in 1960 at Langhorne, he was multiple-time champion. It was back running by the end of the year with a top-notch driver. Same car. So, it was just, to me, it's unthinkable. The age of people that raced here. Those people raced here with their leather helmets and their son's shoes tied to the front springs, for good luck, and just crazy stuff.
So this site actually isn't closed at all. It's still part of the Piedmont Interstate Fairgrounds complex, and they still have quite a number of regular events that happen here. In fact, the track that we were just on, it still really gets used, just not as a racetrack. So it's still here, it's just sad to see it not in raceable condition though, because that's where so many of us love these old racetracks and fairgrounds, is when you can see your local heroes here on a weekend, just racing it up, you know, going for glory. Just really sad.
Well, I think it's sad for one thing. You know, with such a nice racetrack, even though I never got a chance to run it that much, but the track is. And looking back, and I always try to be a little bit of a historian myself, as far as, you know, what tracks are there and who ran them and so forth. And then looking back, you know, it's just sad that it's went by the wayside.
It had its day. It had a long run. I mean, horse racing and motorcycle racing in 1911 until whenever it finally did fold up in the late 70s or 80s was, you know, several generations got to see racing here. And thankfully, a lot of it's documented. And you're doing a great thing here by continuing to document the history of this wonderful speedway. As I sit here, I can see it all. I feel like you know, I feel like it's still here. So I guess those are the ghosts in my mind. It's just everywhere I look in this place, I hardly ever sat in the grandstand. I sat in the grandstand for that one race during the fair, like 1978 or 9, whenever it was. And I saw that match race with Billy Wade and Ned Jarrett and Pearson and Richard Petty. I saw Ricky Nelson there in 1979.
Hey.
He came and the stage was right there, and it was cold that night, but I always liked Ricky Nelson. And I guess that's about it. I love being here. I mean, I'm just sort of melting into the place. Maybe I'll sprinkle my ashes here. Well, that's yet to be determined, and I hope it's a long time off.
As I sit here and finish my tour of this place, it really strikes a chord with me. I'm inspired by the people who raced here, the legends like Wendell Scott, who broke the color barrier here, or people like Ned Jarrett, who won here 6 times, or Chuck Piazza, who won one of the last races here. These men are my heroes. And it's sad to see so many of the places where they made their names being reduced to just dirt piles. And that's why we've got to support these tracks that we have left. One problem with this track in its later years was the attendance did drop. And it's just so important that we fill the stands of those places. The Piedmont Interstate Fairgrounds may be gone, but it's our duty to make sure that the memories will live on forever.